The sales robots have taken over, and they're decimating deals left and right, destroying them right in their tracks. On the AI for Sales podcast, our mission is to empower everyday sellers to embrace AI superpowers to build new bridges and crush quota. Dr. Joel Abon said it best in the AI for Sales book. In sales, time kills deals. In AI for Sales, AI kills time. Join our hosts as we learn from the C-suite of the world's fastest growing companies about how you can leverage AI today to transform your sales revenue engine while being the best version of you.
Welcome back, everybody. I am your host of the AI for Sales podcast. Today, I'm here with Rohan Sampath, who is the founder and CEO of a company called CoPilot. It's copilotup.com, and they provide AI-powered deal insights. Generative AI-powered solution for unparalleled deal visibility and sales coaching. Rohan, welcome to the show.
Chad, pleasure to be on your show.
Well, I know we had a great conversation the other day, so I'm very excited for our audience to understand what it is you do by surfacing such high-level and strategic insights that are also can be very tactical. And what do you do next as a leader? Before we go into the weeds, I like to help our audience get to know you by asking the question, what was your deal when you were younger? Like, when you were growing up, where'd you live? What was your passion as a kid?
Yeah, this sounds a little cliched, but I've lived in multiple countries across the world in the UAE. So I grew up in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates. I spent some time in India. I've spent a lot of time in Canada and the United States. So I came at the age of 17 to study in the United States, went to school in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco Bay Area. And your question was, what got me ticking as a kid? I don't know. I think it was airplanes, like many kids. Airplanes, space travel, all the usual stuff. I think there was this one homework assignment we had to do at the age of 10, which was, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it was all like pilot, astronaut. I think there was like a, prime minister or something in there as well. But just lots of different.
That's pretty cool. My thing was pilot as well as a kid until I did the math and figured out what the revenue is for a pilot. And then I did the expenses and I was like, the math didn't work for me with my high cost of living expectations.
Yeah, no, it's.
But I think pilots make a lot more now than they used to.
That was a very rude shock. I mean, you see pilots really snazzily dressed with a great, that pilot hat and the whatever they have and the lapel pin that they have, and you think they must be exceptionally well paid. So.
Yeah, that's right. They've got the silver wings, but apparently I don't think it's made out of silver. So, but great profession, and I think sitting in the back of the airplane is where I prefer to be in today's.
Yeah, me too, I guess. And then I'll just a couple of other things, I guess. When I was at school, I did a bunch of work in natural language processing, machine learning, well before it was the hottest thing on the planet. So a few years ago, I did a master's in CS, focused on NLP, natural language understanding, etc. And that combined with observing where the market is in terms of conversational intelligence led me to build CoPilot.
Wow. Well, it's certainly been interesting to see the technologies that are coming to bear. I was just on a news station earlier today, and in the preview, they showed that by 2025, I think it is, the GDP is supposed to grow by 21% because of AI. And I remember back in the day when Bill Clinton spoke and he said, hey, we grew by 5% because of internet and other types of productivity enhancements. And I'm just looking at AI saying, wow, 21%, that's 4 times where Bill Clinton was saying, hey, claiming victory on 5%. So I think there's a lot of upside. We just have to get through the next year or two, and then things are going to be really interesting.
There is so much happening in this space. And, when you look at a number like 21%, it's when right now we think of AI as, there are AI-powered solutions. And that's going to be the case maybe for the next 2 or 3 years. Everyone's going to say they are AI-powered. But very quickly, expectations are going to adjust to the point where every single solution out there, from your washing machine, if you think about it today, your washing machine has software, your dryer has software, your microwave has software, your car has tons of software, in fact. And so a very similar thing is going to happen with AI, where there's just going to be it's going to be hidden. You don't even know. You just know that there are a whole host of capabilities that were not possible before that are possible now as a consequence of having AI. It's going to be in the background. I think we're in this moment now where every single, particularly B2B companies, like we use AI for this, we use AI for that. That's probably going to last for the next year or two. And then very quickly, we're going to go back to what has always been the way you create value by solving a problem, right? And AI is a way to solve more problems more accurately and more efficiently than was ever possible before. But I think there'll be less of the marketing spiel that we're seeing today.
Yeah, I agree. Even my sprinkler system this last year, the neighborhood that I live in gave us a $1,000 allowance to upgrade our sprinkler system. So they gave us this thing called Ratio, I think is the name of the unit. It plugs into the weather pattern, and it has a soil meter in the ground in about 4 or 5 different areas in the grass. So this year, my sprinkler has only run about 5 times. Last year, I was running it on automatic, 12 minutes per zone times 12 zones every night and every morning. So you do the math of that, 2 times 12 times 10 to 15 minutes per zone, you're looking at lots and lots and lots of water. I'm down 90% in my water usage. So bring that into the whole neighborhood. That's the kind of thing that I think AI can solve at scale and shave a lot of waste, right? No matter what you apply it to.
That's incredible. And yeah, especially for something like that, when you combine it with some of the other advances you see out there, sort of computing at the edge and low latency with the cloud, and basically being able to download weather data in addition to measuring what's in the soil and putting all of that together to come to a good answer. That was not very possible 5, 6, 7 years ago. And now, so a lot of things are enabled by the presence of, for example, 4G. Not for your case because it probably runs on Wi-Fi, I think. But the combined movement of various pieces of technology have produced incredible results. It's a very exciting time throughout the world, but particularly in B2B and B2B selling, I guess.
Yes. Well, when you went to school and studied AI and NLP and everything else, is there any business problem or maybe world hunger or cancer, or is there something that you looked at and said, wow, we're close because AI is available, whether it's inside your product or just something in general? What did you see or what did you think about?
So one of my favorite stories here is when I was doing a master's focused in NLP. NLP stands for natural language processing, and NLU is understanding. And so we learned a little bit about the history of this space. So, for example, in the 90s, the entire space was filled with linguists. So people who understood language, understood subject-verb agreement, and try to create all these complicated rules to say that when you're translating from French to Spanish, here are the rules you have to use, and here's how you dissect a sentence in terms of its parts of speech, etc. And then you run it through this computer model, and you get a translation on the other side, right? So they were trying to really boil down a language to its specific component parts. And what was crazy, even a few years ago, was the best-in-class models out there were black boxes. They had no fundamental understanding of how language is structured. They had no understanding of what is a subject-verb agreement, for example, but they could produce flawless translations far better than the status quo. And so what was really interesting about that was that with the amount of compute we have today, and with the amount of data and training data that we have today, and that we had even 5 years ago, black box models, deep learning models, neural networks, can produce results at a level of accuracy without actually fundamentally understanding the space. I know a lot of linguists were really pissed off at that because they were like, well, how is this model doing this? It doesn't understand it, but it doesn't need to because it has lots of compute, has lots of examples, and that by itself is good enough to get a good.
It's more of a pattern recognition than a true understanding of what's under the hood.
That's right, and even GPT, because it sounds like it understands you. What's really happened is that all language models, all they do basically is predict the next word, right? Predict the next word or the next phrase. But GPT, the incredible thing that GPT unlocked was that you can actually get really good performance by dramatically scaling up compute. There was a sense in the industry before that, there was a diminishing returns. So let's say you went from X number of parameters, like 70 million to 700 million, the model's not going to get better. It's just going to, stay at about the same place. And GPT just proved them wrong, and all the other large language models out there have proved them wrong. They just threw more compute at it, more dollars at the problem, not a particularly sophisticated structure, and you get such incredible results from it.
Wow. Well, it's interesting. So let's now pivot into your company. So CoPilot, what are the types of businesses that you work with, and what's the business problem that the AI that you've created solves?
Yeah, great question. So I want to talk a little bit about what the state of the art in conversational intelligence is considered today, right? So for a lot of your viewers will probably be familiar with Gong and Chorus and some of these other companies out there. And when we work with all of them and we partner with them. But until about 2 years ago, actually until about a year ago, the best in class in what was considered conversational intelligence was things such as, here is a analysis of your conversation in terms of keyword matches. Yeah, this was said X number of times. This person spoke for this amount of time, talk ratios, hesitance, etc., etc. The beauty of large language models is really about applying understanding to what is being said in your conversation. So it's no longer about, hey, the word budget was mentioned 25 times, but it's more about, here was the thematic topics that were talked about in your conversation. The objections mentioned in this conversation or in this set of conversations fall into these 4 broad clusters. It sounds like this quarter, people are particularly upset about the lack of packaging or the lack of tiered pricing. And that is coming up as a theme more often in your conversations. It sounds like this quarter in EMEA, there has been a lot more concern about the GDPR implications of your new solution. And again, it's not about the specific keyword GDPR was mentioned. It's more about understanding or trying to understand what is the most important elements in a conversation between a customer or a prospect and a sales rep. And so in a nutshell, so that's really the progression that we want to facilitate. In the future, and this is when we want to enable, and obviously we want to be the dominant player, this is going to be the new definition of conversational intelligence. It's not just about recording the call. It's not just about the transcript. It's not just about the keywords and the frequency of how many times anything was said. It's about really taking, let's say, a corpus of 1,000 calls and telling me, what are my customers telling me? What do they care about? What are the most common topics coming up? So think of CoPilot as really deeply understanding the voice of the customer by using the latest large language models to analyze customer conversations. And the goal there is to answer questions like, what are my customers telling me? And what are the objections they're coming up with? How are my reps responding to those objections at scale? And so to your question on who do we serve, most of our customers today are larger customers, as you would expect. If you're a small team, you don't really need, a lot of analytics. But when you're a larger team with, a frontline sales team, a manager, a director, and a CRO, that's when something like us is really helpful. So, most of the customers we serve have over, let's say, 50 customer-facing professionals, both sales plus CS. So usually, they're 250 employees or more. They make about $40 million or more in revenue.
Got it. So I think about, one of the telecommunications companies that I worked for that did unified communications as a service. And I flew to the Philippines office and we had hundreds of reps that were there. Yep. And you'd have quality assurance people going in and listening to the calls, monitoring the chat, so on and so forth. Yep. And then providing feedback. In that kind of an example, I would expect that CoPilot could sit on top of all of those conversations. And instead of just monitoring 1 or 2 per 100 conversations and just randomly picking them, now you monitor every single conversation down 100%. To its core.
100%. And really try and surface up what are the themes that are coming up and how has that changed over time. And so it gives you a sense of what your customers are telling you at scale. We talk to a lot of CEOs, and a lot of our sales happen to the CEO or at least the CRO. And the really big use case for them is the way I know about what my customers are telling me is through a couple of avenues, right? I either ask the team, so I'm picking calls at random and I'm listening to them, or I'm asking the team. That's not a very scientific way to know what your customers are telling you. Or I run a report on my sales ops fields or whatever it is. I ask my reps to fill out a specific set of fields in my CRM, and then I'll run a report on it. And that's obviously has its own problems where you rely on the rep putting in information, they may miss a bunch of things, etc. So very quickly being able to understand the voice of the customer to make business level decisions, that's really what we want to enable for our customers.
I love it. I think about when we rolled out a sales training program, and this was about $1 million investment that we rolled out. And we didn't just stop at the field reps, but it went to Philippines. So I was there, we broadcasted up on a screen, and then we had small group breakouts in a big conference room with probably 200 people at tables of 10 to 15. So it was facilitators and it was very hands-on. Once it was trained, imagine you're trying to buy a fax plan and you fill out a web form and it's $9.95 a month.
Yeah.
And now this Philippines rep gets on the phone and says, "Oh, how are you today, Rohan? What's the business pain that you're trying to solve? Well, I need a fax. Can you go ahead and send me the quote and I'll sign it right now?"
Yeah.
Well, before we do that, what happens if you don't solve this problem? Well, I won't get my faxes. I need it. Can you send it to me right now?
Yeah.
And so this pissed off the customers,
right,
because they were using enterprise selling skills on Soho, small office, home office sales. Yeah. So I, as a smart business person, I said, pull some of the transcripts. Let me see and hear them. Yeah. And I called a timeout after about 8 days of rolling this out. They're like, "Why are our sales suffering? We should have seen an increase." I was like, "Because you put enterprise class selling against a Soho team, right, which isn't going to fit." So those are the kinds of concepts I think that when you roll out sales training or a new product or a new service, and or the global economic trends change, so many things could be recognized immediately by having your technology.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's both the being able to predict ahead of time, or as a leading indicator what your market's telling you. For example, if there is a macroeconomic trend, you may see it in the numbers if sales are falling, but can you also see it in the conversations, the reasons why people are hesitating, in what they're saying? Budgets are tighter for XYZ reasons, or more CFO level conversations are happening, or there is more talk about needing for discounting, etc. And then you can also figure out how your reps are responding to that change in market circumstances. Are they looking at the 3 or 4 levers they can use to make sure the deal happens? Giving appropriate discounting, making sure the deal gets signed today, appeals to authority, whatever your internal playbook is. Are they executing effectively on it in response to any changes in market conditions? So that's a great example.
Yeah, got it. So we talked a little bit about this. Generally speaking, your customers have human in the loop that are having these conversations. So you listen to all the conversations and then you provide feedback to the management. They roll it out to the reps, and that's how you can pivot faster, right? That's how you drive a cruise ship and make a faster turn. Right. Thinking fast forward a year from now, 5 years from now, when AI conversations actually start to come into the marketplace more and more, it seems to me that the technology can sit on top of the AI conversation as well as the physical human conversation. Yeah. Right? Now it's just 2 separate feeds. So if there's a deal size that's under $1,000, maybe 5,000, we talked about it the other day, 10 or 15. Yeah. But what I remember 15, 20 years ago, the sales leader at Riverbed Technology said, "Hey, look, Chad, 80% of our deals make up 10 to 15% of our revenue." Yeah. So that's the part where whatever that cut line is, maybe you start with 70% of your deals, which is 5% of your revenue, but there's some level where you start introducing AI conversations into the mix. Yeah. Do you think that the technology that you've developed that sits on top of both of those, both physical and AI,
Yeah.
It'll work in both cases, right? It'll provide you intelligence.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a case we haven't fully explored, right? How can we make AI conversational systems better? And that's contingent on AI conversational systems becoming very commonly used, which I think we're still a few years away from. Um, the thing that's interesting to me, we had this conversation around what's that number, and it could be $10,000, $15,000, but it's unquestionable in my mind that that bar is going to go higher. If today, you're selling $3,000 deals over like a very quick sales cycle, that should be automated without a human being in the loop, right? And maybe in a year from now, it becomes 7 and 8 and 10 and 15, whatever it is. I think that's going to happen for sure. A lot more is going to happen without a human in the loop. Now, whether it's like an AI mimicking a human is a more interesting question. I'm a millennial, and so I would be very, at least me personally, I do not want to talk to an AI conversation bot. I think I would much rather just have everything done automatedly, right? So just do all the paperwork, be able to self sign up, just an expansion of product led growth. Basically.
Watch the 60-second video. This looks good. Read some reviews online.
Exactly.
You're good to go. Yeah.
Exactly. Like having the agency to make my own decision without talking to someone that even if they sound like a human, there's this whole argument of the uncanny valley where when human beings can't quite tell that whether it's AI or not, they get really, really, it's very unnerving. So
Yeah, it's a trust issue, right?
Trust issue, right? So I think that's a whole very interesting space around whether AI conversations will enter the mix. And a little bit of it is just generational change. And the other thing I think here is that B2B often follows consumer trends. So let's say in the next couple of we already have IVR systems. Say 1 or say X to go to the next main menu or whatever it is. So if that becomes a lot more intelligent, where it becomes accepted when you call United or you call Comcast or you call all these places that the basic conversations happen with AI, that's going to find its way in B2B selling too in a few years. I mean, historically, if you've always seen a lot of the trends that happen in the consumer space eventually find their way in the B2B space in a few years afterwards. So I think it's very possible it happens. It needs to happen in the consumer space first, so human beings get accustomed to it and comfortable with it, and then I think it will spread to the B2B space as well.
Yep. Where do you think AI for sales is headed? What changes over like right now, it seems like there's a lot of technologies that are blowing up that, you got to try this one and then that one. And, it seems to me consolidation will happen, but where do you see, 5 years from now, what does the AI in sales space look like?
It's a very hard question. I wish I had a crystal ball. I think there are probably 3 broad areas where if I were a CRO, and I talk to CROs all the time, that I would be focusing on, right? One is around demand generation and demand capture. That space is going to see, and you obviously are very familiar with this. This is your bread and butter, but that space is going to see an absolute transformation, in my opinion. The SDR role, how it's going to morph, what is it going to mean to be personalized and valuable, targeted messaging? What does a top of funnel look like in terms of marketing? There is this phenomenon where with AI, with LLMs in particular, the ability to generate content becomes it's so much easier to generate content, which means it's so much harder to break through the noise in terms of getting people to know about your existence. Literally, I can code up a bot to create like 100 content articles about AI and put it on our website, right? And that was not possible, at least not at the level of quality that is possible today. And so the fight for attention is going to be harder and stronger than ever, right? And then I think you go down the funnel around closing deals. How do you get AI empowering the manager is probably one of the most important things that I think sales leaders are aware of. But there's so much that's happening there around how do we get this pivotal part of a revenue organization, the frontline manager, to be really equipped to know what their reps need and be able to do quick coaching and coach at its scale, right? And so there's a lot of work happening there. We help a little bit with that, but there's a ton of stuff outside of what we do as well. And then I think where I see revenue organizations going is embedding deeper and deeper with their customers in the B2B space. For many of the reasons I talked about, if you have this situation where getting attentions of people is much harder, I think your best bet as an organization is to find deeper and deeper ways to engage with your customers and solve problems for them. So rather than trying to get many more customers, really trying to figure out what is the next envelope of problems that you can solve with software or services or whatever it is for your existing customers. So I think having deeply embedded consultative sellers is going to be important, because that's how you actually find new problems within companies that you can solve, and deepen your share of wallet and your ACV and ticket size and all that with every customer that you have.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. One of the questions that was asked to me on this ticker tape news today was around the impact of AI. So it's very fresh knowledge. Apparently there was an article that came out recently that said last month I think it was in May, so recent, 4,000 jobs were disrupted by AI. So 4,000 people lost their job. So my feedback was, well, out of a 3 billion jobs in the world, 4,000 is a rounding error. It's a few minutes off here or there for some people, right? Because those people will land somewhere else.
Right.
And then there's another report that said there'll be 83 million jobs created in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
83 million lost and 63 million created. So a spread of about 19 million across all of those billions of jobs.
Yeah.
So on the whole, it's not as huge of a deal.
Yeah.
What do you see as the biggest group of people that might be impacted by AI? Because you've been in this space for a little while.
Yeah. The first thing I'll say is all these numbers have to be taken with a massive bucket of salt. I was a consultant for a couple of years, management consultant. I created these numbers, so I know how the sausage is made. And I can tell you the sausage is made with thinking and first principles, but no one can predict the future. The historic progression of innovation has always been that new jobs are created, right? People just move to new things, and the nature of existing jobs changes, and the nature of the work that you do changes. I think it's unquestionable, we're seeing it across our customer base, that content creation, content writers, this is the most obvious category that is being disrupted. Every single CRO and CMO, to the extent that we interact with them, talks about the fact that rather than hire a $10,000 PR agency or a content writing agency, ChatGPT does a much better job, or any of these other large language models. So I think that's the most obvious use case for where you can, jobs that entirely rely on that will go away. I think there are lots of jobs that have content writing and creation as a part of what they do. And I think the highest quality content creation will still exist, because GPT is great, but it's consistently above average. It's not consistently great. It's not outstanding content. It's above average content, and that's all you need for lots of circumstances. But there is always going to be a market for great content. But I think all the jobs that have content creation as a large proportion of what they do, those will have to evolve, right? And so that's everything from the SDR role in terms of email writing and sending out, etc. It's just going to be, you have to send a lot more volume. You're going to be equipped to send a lot more volume. If it is PR agencies and writing PR reports or whatever it is, that also could change a lot. So I think that's where I see the biggest immediate impact. From there is a whole host of jobs that will be created, or these jobs will expand, or they will evolve based on the capabilities of AI.
Yeah. Well, to me, if I think about my small company, right, we don't have dozens of employees. So traditionally, I can't afford a high-end marketer to do strategy. And how do I cut up my videos and push them out to LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, all of them. And now with video.ai, it's take the 30-minute long form video, put it in, click on a button, and there I've got a fully optimized post that can go out to LinkedIn. So to me, I wouldn't have been able to afford that traditionally. So I didn't have to let anyone go. And so that's a perfect example of, now I could hire a part-time person for maybe a couple hours a week to use that high level of leverage, where traditionally I would never have been able to afford a full-time $90,000 a year person.
That's right. A lot of AI's impact is going to be, how can you do the same job for the same outcome for a lot cheaper, because it's done by software. And it's amazing. It's amazing the kinds of things that required human beings in the past that were incredibly expensive. Like we're talking orders of magnitude. Video.ai, whatever you talked about, we're talking about an order of magnitude cheaper, if not more, right? So it's
Yes. And the quality is the same or better because 80% of people just don't have that level of superpower.
exactly, that's right. It's crazy.
That's
We're
really
in a
neat.
great world.
Well, if you were to kind of leave our audience with one more use case, because I think I understood CoPilot sits on top of the call center. You've got 50 reps. It could be a sales team, outbound, inbound, doesn't really matter. But if there's a volume of calls, is there an example of somebody that you've worked with perhaps where you said, hey, this was the business problem and then this was the outcome that they experienced as a result of the AI?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'll take one of our customers more recently where they're about a $50 million ARR traditional SaaS business. They have a sales team, they have a CS team. Like many other SaaS companies in the space today, they had a quarter where there was a lot of downsizing, a lot of churn, reduction in licenses and churn because of the macroeconomic conditions. What we helped them pinpoint was that over the last 6 months, the presence of the lack of tiered pricing and the lack of packaging for read-only users was a theme that was coming up a lot more often in the last 2 months as opposed to the months before. And we actually identified for them that this is coming up a lot more often in your conversations where there were downsizes and churn. So we allowed them to go from, hey, here's a macro trend. My downsized and churn customers are talking about lack of tiered pricing as a major reason for churning. And then they could go into the conversation and see how they were talking about it. So very quickly, an insight that would have taken them maybe a few months to come to because they would have had to poll the front line and run the sales ops reports and Salesforce reports, etc. In black and white, we showed them how this was the trend that was driving a lot of that churn and downsizing. And the CEO actually came and told me that, hey, Ron, we're a $50 million shop. If we had this insight about 6 months before, we would have built out a tiered pricing model. We would have been on this, and that would have probably saved us about $3 or $4 million in ARR. A lot of these customers, that was our rough estimate based on going into the data. We would have known this ahead of time, saved ourselves about $4 million in ARR. So it's really about being at the leading edge of what your customers are telling you, right? So that's really the business level value prop. And then there's a lot more that we do at the manager level, at the rep level, et cetera. So I'll leave that for another time. But
I love it because what that brings to mind is I know a CEO of a retail shop, and they're about a $50 million ARR, and they sell software to retail. And they came to me and said, hey, can you help us do outbound with LinkedIn? So we plugged it in, and he knew exactly in the market, which was the mid-market, where it's a higher margin deal. Their biggest competitor, they had a 3-to-1 advantage over their competitor. So they were able to go in aggressively and go start taking that market share. The funny thing is that other C-level, I think it was the CRO of the other company, I don't know how he got my name, I don't understand, but every once in a while these things happen. And sure enough, he came in and he was feeling the pain of losing that mid-market. So having the ability to have the tentacles to track all of these kinds of triggers, whether you're the company that's going after a competitor or you're the competitor that's being eaten, it's important to have your flanks up and understand what's going on inside your business.
That's right. That's right. And how do you know that when you have 1,000 conversations happening every month? How do you know what your customers are really telling you at scale? That's really what it boils down to.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because the value proposition sounded great. When we would tell CMOs that I worked with at companies, I said, hey, we can put this technology in and, we can surface things like product management updates and macro trends. And until somebody smart understands how to use the data, then it's great. We have it all in our CRM, but it's unusable. Right. So CoPilot makes the unusable data usable. Right. And having an understanding of what data is available and how to track it is super important. So
yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Chad.
Very cool. Well, I've always enjoyed these conversations. Rohan Sampath, founder, CEO of CoPilot. You can find his website at copilotup.com.
That's right.
Thank you so much for being here, everyone. And we'll catch you on the next AI for Sales podcast.
Thanks, Chad. Great to be on.
Hey, you made it this far in your AI for Sales journey. Want to augment your sales growth? First, leave us a review and then visit www.scalex.ai to claim your free strategy session today.